Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Tony Beaman again for another edition of Beaman with Tony, and we have a very special guest today, and I can't wait to get into a lot of stuff we're going to get into. Mr. Joshua Caldwell, and from his LinkedIn profile, he described himself as an anti-capitalist, abolitionist, socialist, and a nerd. But he is the founder and executive director of the Rise Together Foundation, the Bias, which is a platform, I believe, that tracks structural barriers in organizations. And from my understanding, it's the only public platform assessing the discrimination, biases, and inequities and systemically, business outcomes. I'm gonna let Josh talk about it. We got a lot to get to, man. Welcome to Beaming with Tony. Thank you so much for being here today.
No, thank you. So yeah, Rise Together Foundation is my 501c3 charity. And as much as I would love to take credit for DeBias is one of the partner companies that we work with via that, and I wanted to make sure we brought them up because you're right, they're doing some phenomenal things. And let me give a shout out to Amber Thompson, who's the CEO and founder of DBias. But yeah, thank you so much for having me, Tony. We've got a lot to go over. So where do you want
Oh
to start?
yeah, we do, man. Now, my man, now you out of are you in Boston? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm it's funny because you gave me the nice intro with all the titles that tend to get me in trouble. And I always tell people I'm literally like I'm from Plymouth, Massachusetts. I grew up like and looking at the rock, right? So like I come from 500 years like straight off the boat colonizers from Portugal and Spain, right? So
Oh my
um,
goodness.
I come from 4 generations of police and Marines, so like I felt very very far away from the proverbial tree, right? Um, yeah. So long story short, yes, I'm right north of Boston.
Wow. Wow. Well, I mean, tell us how you grew up, man. I mean, because wow, you done a lot of stuff. Yeah, tell us how you grew up, and because when I was checking you out, doing my research, and I saw abolitionists, I was like, abolitionists? Oh man, you give me a history. This taking me way back to grade school. Looking up, back, the slavery days and stuff, man. But how'd you grow up, man? And tell us how you came to be who you are today, man.
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of it is actually a function of my semi-recent mental health journey, right? So I come from, so I always tell people I'm probably a parallel to, if you're familiar with history, West Virginians during Reconstruction, right? Where I grew up on the other side of the tracks in a poverty-stricken white family, right? So we were the white trash family that had black neighbors, brown neighbors. And so I always ask people, when were you first racialized? Right. So for me, it was like kindergarten. So, like in how you answer that question pretty much shows like your relationship to whiteness and blackness, right? As a societal construct. So of course, when I'm 5 years old, I don't have that terminology or know-how or know anything, right? I'm undiagnosed ADHD. I've got a whole bunch of family trauma that anyone who lives
We all.
right? I'm very open with my processing of that, but all of that is a function of living in an oppressive dichotomy, right? If you're not a part of the ownership class, sooner or later, somehow, right? Oppression affects the individual, and that's where you kind of see intersectionality come into play, right? Where that's how an oppressive system affects the individual. So later on in life, I go to school, I get educated. I'm the first in my family to go to college, first to graduate. Uh,
Congratulations.
no, thank you. And it's funny because my dad. So my first memory, and I don't want to screw too far away here. I know we're on a time. But
Really, brother?
yeah, my father. I always tell people, and I'm currently writing a book about this, which I'm sure he'll love. But he's like the epitome of like whiteness, right? As like a statistic, right? My dad no one would say a bad thing about my dad, right? He is a country singer and drummer. He played in a country band. He was a drummer for Reba McEntire before I was born. He liked to
Oh
remind
my
me I
goodness.
ruined that dream for him, right? And then, he was a Comcast cable layer for most of his life. Didn't graduate high school. Spent his money, married my stepmom, who comes from generations of money, and now he bought stock early in Tesla, and he's a multimillionaire, right? So there's that statistic where white high school dropouts, hi dad, earn more than black PhDs, right? So like there's a very literal statistic that kind of enforce the very dichotomy that's at play here. And I don't even know how we started out on this tirade that I'm on, but let me backtrack here, Tony.
Do your thing, man. We're just talking.
What was the original question? How did I get started?
No,
Yeah,
no, just how just kind of how you grew up, man, and how like I guess how you became, the anti-capitalist abolitionist, man. Like what were some of the maybe lines in the sand, that kind of like, boom, where you were just like, what, that's it.
yeah. So I mean, growing up for me, right? Again, there's that point of when were you racialized? The function of that begs the question of like when did you start to see like inequity, right, and how it affects people and yourself. And then once you start to understand how that inequity exists, um, what do we do to either enforce it or not enforce it, right? So for me, it became a question specifically during COVID, which is why I started the charity. Of like, hey, I'm a great Twitter arguer, but that shit's performative as fuck, right?
Mhm.
So what can I do that is not performative per se, but like pushes something in a direction where we can start to fill those gaps of equity and not necessarily just straw man and kind of pat ourselves on the back, right?
Mhm.
Because most things created under the capitalist dichotomy enforce that oppressive dichotomy, right? So, let me pose you a question. Where does profit come from?
Oh Lord. Well, I'm an MBA, and as an entrepreneur, the profits are you got your revenue minus expenses, and that typically brings you your EBIT, and you can throw in your um, what is it, percentage of the depreciation and whatever, and that will give you
Mhm.
and da, 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 but
Well,
for
so,
sure.
so as a concept, right? So profit, right, as a concept, when we're running an organization, is really extracted labor value. But that excess of labor value, it delineates from the plantation economics, right? So all that value is originally created as a part of the corporation because of the free labor and IP and stolen of black bodies and indigenous bodies, right? So now, as you transmute that over 500 years, you see inflection points. Now, if you've seen Ava DuVernay's The 13th, we see a major inflection point for how slavery is codified within the prison pipeline, with
Oh,
things
sure.
like the crime bill, things like Nixon and the war on drugs, and a whole bunch of things, right?
Mhm.
What we also see is at that same time during the Nixon and Reagan era, there's a shift into what we call shareholder economics, and they use Milton Friedman literally as an economic advisor. So what we start to see is you have the political codification. Lee Atwater, for your viewers to take a look up, is a Republican strategist who helped pivot into the Southern strategy, appealing to overt racism, right? So you have them codifying political racism. You have economic slavery being codified via the prison system. And then now what we have is we have economic slavery recodified via the corporation as this shift to shareholder economics, right? Because X amount of dollars created, right, for the majority of this country are either intrinsically related or directly related to the sale of bodies, right? So it's just we're looking at, all right, so now if a corporation is built out of a structure of oppression, this is why we see things like the labor movement having to struggle for all that That's why it was the march for civil rights and jobs, right? Jobs have always been a function of either enforcing or addressing oppression in some sort of variable.
Wow. Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I think that COVID exposed a lot of stuff, particularly for your generation. Hey, from the I guess I'm an Xer, the X generation, but exposed a lot, a lot of inequities for all of us. I really shined a light on a lot of stuff for sure, and yeah, I know that well, I know myself, there are some things that, particularly like the George Floyd, ooh, that really put shined a light on a lot of stuff, kind of shook me, like I'm sure a lot. But man, for you, man, well, what are some of the things, specific things per se, like in capitalism that
Mm.
maybe we, maybe we can change, or do you have a different per se system that can maybe kind of even the playing field per se?
Yeah, well, yes, and so RTF, Charity Rise Together Foundation, works to create what we call a circular economy of sorts, uh,
Uh-huh.
where we're basically trying to create socialized economies that act as direct reparations in gentrifying communities. So basically, like, think about it. And this is another thing where, like, now we have to go back and redefine what reparations is because everyone
I was
uses it.
going to talk to you
I know,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
This is
yeah.
perfect, brother.
Right.
Bring
So,
it.
I mean, so like just from a 500-foot view, right? Reparations are systemic redressment of systemic issues, right? Yes, 1000% Eurocentric governments owe paid dollars to Black, Brown, and Indigenous groups, like just flat out, right? There's a governmental responsibility for reparations, not just the United States, right? I mean,
No.
look at the jewels that just got coronated on a certain Europe king's head, right? How many of those jewels came from England? None of them. Like there's
Oh,
all
I mean, you got, the island, Barbados, Cuba, they're all coming together, Virgin Islands are all like, yo, you know what? Give us back our stuff, that you stole from, give us our stuff back,
it's yeah, it's unreal. And yet there are still people here who argue against it, right? Like, anyways, um, we started talking about how can we operate in capitalism?
Ah,
Uh, well, so the other piece of reparations, right, is so it's redressment of a oppressive system, right? So if we look at capitalism as the oppressive system, and we understand that we need to center those most affected by it, right? So my biggest hurdle is I'm a cishet white dude who's running a reparations charity, right? Because I step into a room and it sets off red flags for both of the majority groups I'm trying to speak to, right? White people don't trust me because I'm a race traitor, right? And Black people and brown and indigenous folks don't trust me because I am literally representative of people who have fucked them over for generations, and rightfully so, right? Not rightfully so, they've been fucked over, but rightfully so, they don't trust me. So that puts me in an interesting kind of position where I need to build trust in both sides, but also like not when I'm addressing white folk in particular, there's always the possibility of what we call backsliding, right? Where you start to reinforce the white supremacist modality, just because we're all constantly steeped in it, right? So it's about redressing that with the white counterpart and trying to give space and empathy, right? Because white supremacy demands perfectionism. It demands that we don't empathize. White supremacy demands cancel culture, really. And so, holding a space for those people to learn and grow, but also not excuse them if they continue to enforce it, right? And that's kind of the hard balance. Man, I'll just talk in directions forever.
Oh no, I hear you. What about the level of fear, I mean, hey, from, it's interesting because like, how, we're kind of opposite in a little bit, because I'm a black guy who grew up, I was like the only black kid in class, I grew up in Kansas, you know what I'm saying? And my, the black, we had definitely the black section and stuff, but hey, for whatever reason, we lived amongst, the more affluent, I don't know, not that we were or anything,
Sure.
but it's interesting, but from, say just my perspective, from a lot of black people's perspective, it seems like there, the level of fear, like, oh, we can't, if we give this to this group, it's going to take away from us, from my stuff, and the fear of that, when really, hey, there's really more than enough resources and money and all that for all of us and everything, according to the law of abundance, that is.
Well, so I'm
like,
also a fan of modern monetary theory. So I'm
yeah.
but
Yeah, yeah.
the fear you
But the
described.
fear thing, talk to me about that, from, yeah, I mean, or is there a level of fear amongst, would you say, oh gosh, and I hate, the white supremacy thing. It's just I don't want to, but like, is there the level of fear, especially lately, since in these last few years, it's like this fear mongering stuff, but I don't know. What's your perspective on that?
Well, so fear, the fear you described specifically is interesting because the fear you described is very much at the root of whiteness, right? Because it's a fear of
You
this.
said it, not.
Right. No, I know it is. I mean, because like it's this fear. I mean, I'll give you an example, right? For those who haven't read it, Heather McGee wrote The Sum of Us, a phenomenal book. She was the executive director of Demos. They're a statistical driven data firm that worked on a whole bunch of projects. But anyways, she did a whole bunch of studies where she went all across the United States and interviewed people. But do you know, obviously, I'm sure you're familiar with the whole black men can't, or black people can't swim trope, right?
Okay.
Right.
That's always intrigued me because I grew up swim, all my black friends, we all grew up, but I didn't really see that until I went to college, because I went to college at the University of Arkansas, and definitely in the South, I was shocked that none of the black friends like none of them could swim. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it.
And so what happened was, and this is again historically what has happened. Public pools had renaissance during early histories of the of white populations, right? So public pools, public education, public housing, all of these things had super high approval ratings. That is until we wanted to expand them to Black, Brown, and Indigenous populations. So what do? We closed the public pools. We made private communities and gated communities that had private pools where Black kids weren't allowed to swim, and we closed the public pools. So generations of kids didn't learn to swim because we literally took that away from them. And so there's this idea within whiteness that everything around equity has to be zero sum. And that's not the case, right? Us making sure that people of, I hate using this, but I'll use it to throw it back at people, to make sure that all the black, brown, blue, pink people of the world can participate in society equitably, right? That's the goal of most people on my side of the thought process, right? What can we do to not? And a lot of pseudo intellectuals will start getting into this, like, oh, well, you're talking about securing the equality of outcomes and not opportunities, right? And like, yeah, that's all well and good in a vacuum, but if we exist in a society that has dug a hole, right, you can't expect any population to dig themselves out, bootstrap themselves out of that hole, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, like, I can tell you from what I've witnessed in my lifetime, it started a lot in the education system, where because when I went to school, I mean, not only, it was swimming was required. I mean, it was part of school. Once we got to seventh grade and stuff, and we had our PE class and all that kind of stuff. Well, for one full quarter was all swimming, and in order to pass, everybody had to swim a mile, and you had to dog paddle for 10 minutes. I mean, all these little things, was part, just like, the arts, and music, these things have been taken out of school. And I remember when I went to college, for instance, the Pell Grant, I mean, like that, every year they start taking more and more and more and more and more away from the Pell Grants and stuff, increased the costs and all that kind of stuff to where we have now, like, oh my goodness, and then in the George Bush presidency, when the No Child Left Behind thing, so now people just rush through education. Hey, I've got a 7-year-old daughter, and I'm like, whoa, 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 I gotta pay. I'm paying for her music class. I'm paying for all these other extra things that they don't have in school now. It's like wild to me.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
and this might go against some of the people who are going to be watching this, but it's really a function of privatizing things that are necessary for us to participate, right? That's a function.
Oh yeah. Like you mentioned earlier too, the prison systems, how they privatized prison systems, and how it's boom, what it is we have today. It certainly wasn't that when I was a kid growing up, Woo.
And like in crime in prison is a whole thing we could do hours on, right?
We talk all day about a lot of stuff.
Crime is a function of an oppressive system, right? It's not because people are inherently immoral, right? Don't get me wrong, there's always like anomalies, right? There's statistical anomalies, there's murderers, there's mass murderers and shit, but overall, people steal, people do stuff because they're trying to survive. And so like the fact that, like, if I were to say that, people in prison who are doing full-time jobs deserve minimum wage, people would destroy me because they view people in prison as lesser than. But do you know how many Fortune 500 companies use prison labor where people get paid 25 cents? Right? Like,
I mean, that's not to mention some of these global corporations too. But they don't have, some of the stuff, these rules that we have here in the US.
Well, so let me quickly, I know we're coming up on the time limit here. So
okay, let's talk.
Well, I think it'll kick us out. I don't know. Dimitri might have to tell us. But Rise Together Foundation, to give myself the quick pitch, is basically we're doing two things. One, I'm creating a SaaS ecosystem, software as a service, for anyone who doesn't know, where basically what sucks about running your entity, what sucks about your project, right? And then we're trying to socialize all of that stuff using iterative technologies, some AI stuff that's coming out. And we're trying to create kind of a non-extractive partnership. So right now I'm building email CRM automations and websites. And then we're putting them up for kind of various, an amalgamation of inbound funnels, if you will. The flip side of that, so that's Project Obelisk. That will, go to any existing business that operates and is looking for, a non-extractive partner to help with them. On the flip side is Nucleus. These will be fully funded community centers that basically ask the question, what societally in your gender-fine community is being gate-kept from you? Is it childcare? Is it healthcare? We fund these organizations. We create, so in 18 states right now, there's something you can do called a B Corp. It's a benefit corp, but basically the main difference between a B Corp and an S Corp or a regular corporation is it ties the fiduciary duty in your bylaws to the community and not the shareholders, right? So for me, again, I think, we should be moving to generally nonprofits for anything that is required for society. But in the interim, I think B Corps are a good pass through, right? I also work with companies to transition them from an S Corp to a B Corp with what we call an ESOP, or an equitable stock option plan, similar to an employee stock option plan, but basically we're trying to make community-owned organizations that would fill those gaps and then contribute to a rev share for that community, which is then operated and managed by an external community board, right? And that would be things like land back, housing, buying prisons and reforming the prison industrial complex, right? So that's my big, like, big 500 foot. I think we could really, fuck some shit up. And then my last plug for D-Bias, Amber is writing an AI algorithm where basically they take the truth. So if you're familiar with AI, basically you feed it data, which is called the truth, to teach it and train it. We're teaching and training it. I'm just a strategic advisor, so I'll use the royal we here. We're training it basically to take a look at otherized and marginalized groups and their data. And then through constant surveying and tracking, it'll be able to find where organizational oppression stems from, and then how you can rectify it, and then we'll be tracking those outcomes. That will then sooner or later be aggregated into what we're calling an impression index or an impression score. So similar to like a Glassdoor or anything like that, you'll be able to see, not only how people experience oppression in the organization, but what the organization is doing to either enforce or redress oppression.
Right on, right on. My man, congratulations on all your success, all the stuff you're doing. I mean, hey, you mentioned, but before, the show that, hey, you're seeking some more, pay-in type, and that's gonna come, man, because you're obviously incredibly intelligent. I mean, everybody with ADHD, we all everybody. And look at Elon Musk, man. He's done all kinds of stuff, and so even you're an intelligent person, man, that's capable of doing all kinds of stuff. So I'm looking forward. I think everybody's looking forward to a lot of things that you're going to be accomplishing, and we got to have you back on, man. We can talk all day about a lot of stuff.
No, I appreciate you having me on. I'll even allow the Elon Musk comparison, even though I think he's a terrible person. But
yeah, oh no, yeah, believe me, I'm not a fan. I'm just using that as a.
But like, of course, you picked the dude who inherited South African genocide money.
Yeah.
What a way to end the show.
Nah, man, we're gonna have you back because we have a lot to talk about. Like I wanted to really talk about this white Jesus thing that you
oh man, we didn't even get to that.
Oh my gosh, man! Like, there's a lot we didn't get a chance to get to, man. So yeah, I got to get out to Boston and hang out with you, man. You got to get out here to Oakland sometime, brother.
Oh, are you kidding me? I love Oakland. If it wasn't so crazy expensive, we probably would have moved out there. I mean, I'm in Boston.
Oh yeah.
But Oakland be setting some prices crazy.
Oh yeah.
White Jesus podcast. Hopefully, if I ever get it finished and distributed, we also have an app I'm working on called Woke Up White, which is for white people to redress their whiteness and track, ongoing gamification of like redressing how you interact in society. Yeah, good times.
That's awesome. Well, hey, we look forward to all of your stuff, man, that you're going to be accomplishing. One more time, Tony Beaman. I wish we had more time, but that's all the time we have for today. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Joshua Caldwell, and we will see you next time.